everyone, Materim here again, and it's been a while since I've done one of these. Today's RPG talk is going to focus on the Pokemon Tabletop United fan-made RPG. The first Let's Play of which is my highest viewed video, so I figured you guys would be interested in this. Pokemon Tabletop United, or PTU, is a fan-made tabletop RPG by the folks at PokemonTabletop.com. Currently, they're in version of 1.05, and they've been working on 1.06 for a while, but I have not actually looked at any of the potential changes that they're going to do, so everything we're looking at right here is going to be from that 1.05. So, first, I want to talk about the fact that this book is massive. I actually downloaded it and had it printed out at Kinko's, and I mean it's 500 plus pages, give or take. And I think that's fair because they're trying to accomplish a lot here. The book is divided up into 10 chapters. The first is a basic introduction, kind of talking about what you need to play, you know, the staple of what is a role-playing game, that sort of thing. It also does note that there are a number of supplemental books that they've put out for this system that covers things like a fantasy-based Pokemon game, a science fiction one, and a book specifically talking about legendary Pokemon and their place in an RPG. So I think that's very interesting information there. Then they move on to character creation, and by that I mean the trainer that you portray. In this game, you do portray a trainer of some type who has Pokemon. Pretty obvious. But the trainers have their own classes, and there's a 9-step character creation process that takes you through the whole thing. The classes or the characters are not regimented into classes like, say, in a Dungeons and Dragons game. In fact, classes are really more like features where you can pick and choose as you level, and you can have up to 4 different classes, which essentially just open various skill lists and ability lists for you. So it's a very interesting take on a class-based system. Then we get into the chapter 3, which covers your skills, edges, and features. Skills are pretty self-explanatory. Edges and features are different categories of abilities that you have as a trainer. Your features are more class-oriented. So if you are an ace trainer class, you will have specific features based on helping your Pokemon actively participate in combat better. And the edges are more of a passive thing. Like it allows you to unlock different abilities that are usually anchored to one of your particular skills. Chapter 4, we get into the trainer classes. Now, there are a lot of classes here. They pretty much break them down into several groups. There's a group of introductory classes, which I kind of like because if you're first getting started with this game, there's going to be a lot to deal with. So you may want to restrict your players to their first class being one of these introductory classes to kind of get their feet wet. Now, I did not do that in my playthrough, as anyone who has watched it will notice, and I think ultimately it was to the detriment of the game, particularly when you're dealing with people who are not necessarily familiar with Pokemon and the setting, as we did have one player who had never played before, and by giving them kind of carte blanche to make whatever they wanted, it ultimately became very confusing for that player. But the introductory classes are going to be stuff like your capture specialists, your ace trainers, that sort of thing. And then they've got battle style classes, which are focused on different ways of battling, whether you're somebody who throws out a single Pokemon and just tries to make that one last, as long as you can, or if you're constantly switching up your Pokemon. Then they've got a bunch of specialist classes, whether you specialize in certain types, certain performance abilities for the contest, which we'll get into a little later. Then there are some professional classes, which is where you get like your Professor Oaks of the world, your Pokemon researchers, your chefs who make the various things that Pokemons eat, that sort of thing. Then there are fighter classes and supernatural classes, which really have more to do with your character getting involved directly in Pokemon battles, which do step away a little bit from how the game and the anime portray things. But it does allow for different game styles, which I think is very important. Then we get into Chapter 5, which is going to talk all about the Pokemon. This is how to manage the Pokemon stats, their moves. Pokemon also can have edges, their abilities. Talks about how to use Pokemon as mounts in the game. Just a lot of information. Then, Chapter 6, we get into the system fundamentals. Now, I want to draw attention to this. The chapter about how to play the game starts 219 pages into this book. To A, give you an idea of how massive this tome is, but B, how much detail it goes into as well. They go into your system fundamentals, which for the most part is like a D20 combat system with D6 skill systems added together. Based on the level of your training, you'll roll a certain number of D6 ranging from 1 to 6, and you're trying to hit a target number. Pretty simple stuff. Then Chapter 7 is combat. Now, this is the meat and potatoes of any Pokemon game, as anyone who has played them will be able to tell you. They go into a lot of stuff here. It actually reminds me a lot of sort of a mash between Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 and 4th edition, with leaning a little bit heavier towards 4th edition. But I think that's good. I think all of the things that didn't work for that edition in terms of making a Dungeons & Dragons game are exactly what makes it work for Pokemon, because Pokemon are limited by a certain number of just attack types that they can use. Utilizing the map as heavily as it does certainly helps get that feel of a Pokemon battle. So I definitely think that was a strong point there. Chapter 8 is Pokemon contests. And for those of you who aren't super familiar with Pokemon, I always felt that the Pokemon contests were kind of a tacked-on thing to appeal to maybe, I mean, as sexist as this may sound, to appeal to girls who didn't want to fight their Pokemon. It's all about like fashion show kind of thing, using the Pokemon's abilities to impress a crowd rather than do battle. And I do have to admit, as tacked on as it feels in the actual Pokemon games, the computer games, or the DS games rather, it feels equally tacked on here in the RPG. It uses an entirely different system. So after you've spent 250 some odd pages learning how to battle with the Pokemon, now to be able to show them off, you have to learn an entirely new system as well. Then we get into Chapter 9, which is gear and items. It's done very well. There's really not anything standout here. It talks about how to use your Pokeballs, which is a very math-intensive process. That's one thing you will learn about this game. It is very math-intensive, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in my general thoughts. And then the end is the indices and reference section. This actually is 200 some odd pages. And actually there is a Chapter 11, I forgot to leave off this, which is just your standard like DM advice for how to run the game. But I want to focus a little more on the indices. This is something that when you download the package of all of these, in addition to being in the PDF of the book itself, this chapter is actually also a separate PDF, so you can print it out by itself. And that's something that's almost necessary because there are so many charts, and each move that exists in the game exists as a write-up in this RPG, which is insane. There's just a lot to reference and a lot to learn. So I thought it was nice that they did split that out for you. And the last chapter is running the game. It gives you kind of some ideas of, hey, here's how to run a game that's like the anime. Here's how to run a game that's completely different. And it gives you a lot of ideas. It's definitely one of the better chapters in the book in that it helps folks make the game their own, which I think is very important when you're playing something that's as true to one particular play style as this game ends up being. But so that ends up clocking us in at roughly 500 pages once it's all said and done. So, general thoughts. Pros on the book. Now, I've played the game in a couple of different campaigns now, and I've enjoyed it. It is very detailed. If you are looking to get down to the nuts and bolts and play Pokemon on a tabletop, this game is going to do it for you. It's the best. I've tried to do the Pokemon thing in other systems before, kind of hand-waving it and making up. This certainly is going to get you that. 2, it is super inclusive. It includes all the Pokemon that exist up to the current generation of the game at the time of this video. And I think it's awesome because it means no matter what Pokemon your players are interested in playing, you got stats for it. And I think it gets the feel of Pokemon correct. Between the various class abilities that you can pick up for your trainers, some of which are even like you cheer for your Pokemon and it gives them bonuses, like happens to Ash in the anime. I think that's cool. And I think the combat feels like a Pokemon video game combat. And I think all of those things are awesome. The cons. There is an incredible amount of bookkeeping in this. Essentially, if you're going to allow your Pokemon or your players to have 6 Pokemon like they do in the video game, you're essentially having each player keep track of 7 character sheets, all of which level up individually, gather XP individually, have different skills, have different powers that they can use, and that's before you even factor in the evolutions and that sort of thing. Now, on top of that, for the Game Master, you've got to keep a character sheet of literally every Pokemon that they stumble upon, which means a lot of upfront work, or you can utilize a random generator that they do have online, but you run the risk then of essentially not controlling the encounters and making things very difficult. Also, there are so many different things that a trainer character can do to influence a battle. You essentially have to make character sheets for every trainer you come across too. So for a game that's as combat heavy as Pokemon Tabletop United is, it requires a ridiculous amount of work. Just an absolute ridiculous amount of work for the DM. And that's actually the reason that both of the games that I had run ended up stopping. It was just, for what we were getting out of it, it was too much work for me personally. Now, if you like number crunching and you like pre-planning, then by all means, this may be the perfect game for you. Just putting it out there. Secondly, there's a high learning curve. The game is very math intensive. They did a great job, in my opinion, of essentially pulling out all of the mechanics that exist in the video game and putting them on the table. The problem with that is you don't have the video game to do all the math for you. So there's a lot to learn. And the book's not necessarily organized in the best way, and there's a lot of small rules that can kind of get lost in the massive volume that is this book. But, again, if you like a challenging game where you want to be able to get in and get to the nitty-gritty and customize things, this game is for you. It actually reminds me, in that aspect, a lot of the Champions superhero role-playing game. It's very math-intensive, but you can do just about anything in it. last, because it is a fan-made book, and I believe it's actually a team of 3 people who put this thing together, there are some balance issues. And the one that pops to mind was one that we had issue with because it was the ability Fury Swipes, I believe it was, which in anybody who's played the video game will tell you is a pretty terrible move. But in the RPG, it has the potential to just rock face. Because instead of doing sort of multiple hits with it, they have this multi-attack ability, which essentially multiplies your base damage by the number of supposed hits without requiring additional accuracy checks. So the power of the move can go from nothing to knocking out anyone who comes near you, which can be a little scary. But if you're willing to put in the time and kind of rein in some of the balance issues, maybe control what powers might be gotten, there's a lot that you can get out of the game. Now, all that being said, I may come across as a little negative on the game, which is not what I mean to do at all. I had an absolute blast both times both campaigns that I ran of this game. But for me, I don't know that it's a great fit for my GM style. I very much like to improvise and play by the seat of my pants, and this game does not easily engage with that particular line. But for anybody who's a Pokemon fan, anyone who's ever wanted to roleplay in that world, I absolutely say check it out. It's a great game, warts and all. It's fantastic. If nothing else, it's a great 500-page read. And there's a lot there, I think, that enterprising parties and enterprising GMs can get out of it. So I definitely recommend it. And go out and get it. I mean, support these guys. They've got a forum. There's a lot of community support for this game, and I certainly think it's awesome. So thanks for watching, everybody. I'm sorry that it has been so long since my last video. I'm hoping to do more of them, maybe even some more Let's Plays, once I can kind of get life to stop kicking me in the teeth for a while. So I hope you guys enjoy this one. If you did, please like and subscribe. I don't know what's going to be coming down the pipe, but we've got a lot of different games that my group wants to give a try to, that we may start just doing one-shots and doing Let's Plays of those. I may do more of these RPG Talk reviews. Still not entirely sure. So if you do have any suggestions on things that might be interesting to see for you, definitely leave them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to check up with them and reply. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.